Good afternoon, everybody. I'm New Center Maine's meteorologist Mike Slifer here. We're talking a little bit about a couple of severe warned storms. I guess it's just one storm that has now been split into two warnings. Currently, the severe warned storm that was in Waldo County has crossed the Penobscot, or is currently crossing the Penobscot, and is now moving to coastal Hancock County. All of coastal Hancock County is currently underneath that warning, but National Weather Service Gray is going to extend the warning on the backside of this storm. So let me, oops, wrong tool. There we go. Let's talk a little bit about the genesis of this storm and where we're going. Quickly, I do want to mention, if anybody is in the Penobscot Bay or knows anybody with a boat in the Penobscot Bay, tell them to seek safe harbor now, and tell them to go east toward Castine and Deer Isle when they do so. This storm is about to move out over the Penobscot Bay, and with it, we see the threat for strong wind gusts to about 60 miles an hour, as well as hail up to quarter size. So we're tracking the motion of this storm. It's moving to the east pretty quickly. We've got a second piece of this storm that's crossing now Castine, Bucksport area and tracking almost right along coastal Route 1. Maine 175, 177 going to be under the bullseye of this too. Same idea, wind gusts up to about 60 miles an hour, hail approaching quarter size, and a lot of heavy rain. This is the type of heavy rain that you got to pull over when you're driving because it's tough to actually see. Visibility drops significantly. Blue Hill to Ellsworth, likely going to see some very heavy rain and some lightning out of this one. Bucksport currently seeing that it's passing as we speak. And this does pose a risk to people who are on the MDI, Acadia National Park, Bar Harbor. You're going to want to get off the trails and find somewhere indoors that you can hunker down. So if you are underneath this warning, make sure that you are keeping an eye to the sky and know where you can be safe. If we zoom back out a bit here, there is a secondary line of storms that's moving through interior Washington County right now. I'm keeping my eyes on these ones, especially this one that's eventually going to approach Machias on the southern end of this line. And the reason for that is just because this area, to me, like I said yesterday, looks like the most likely area where we can support strong to severe storms. So given the data that we have right now, I'm just keeping an eye on everything to make sure that nothing rotates or anything like that. If anything like that was to happen, it would be down east. That is certainly where we have the highest risk for severe weather today, which is what we talked a bit about yesterday. So let's zoom back out so you can see all of Maine. We had the first line of storms start to move through early this morning, and since then it has started to grow upscale as it enters this warm and moist environment. We have a lot of energy for these storms to use, and that's why they were able to blow up when they did. If this front was like 2 hours or 3 hours later, I think that we would be talking a lot more about widespread severe weather as opposed to just a few warnings that have been issued. Our hail tracks here show a little bit of hail just north of Belfast, crossing Route 1 near Bucksport. The Penobscot Narrows Bridge is likely where we saw some hail. And according to this product here, most of the hail that we've seen so far is going to be around an inch, a little less than an inch in diameter. About 0.7 inches, and as it approached the Penobscot Narrows Bridge, there we go, closer to about a ½ inch in size. Certainly enough to cause some localized issues, but I really don't anticipate hail to be the big story here. I am thinking that the bigger story is going to be wind. I've been watching the wind on the radar, and it's tough because of where these storms are, but a couple of good things that we can point out right off the bat. Not much rotation with these. Usually what we look for in storms, even with broad rotation, is green pixels near red pixels. So we've got some red pixels here. I'll highlight those. This is likely where we've got some stronger wind gusts, but no green pixels nearby, which is good. And on the leading edge of these storms, and on the southern end of this storm near Lincolnville, we don't see any green nearby. So not much rotation with these. And that's great news. The sounding that came out of Caribou this morning, which is how we view how much energy is in the atmosphere, and also can view what the actual wind profiles of the atmosphere are. We were looking at that data, and there was certainly a threat for some rotation, but because of the timing of this front and the fact that it came through before we could really get that daytime heating going and tap into a lot of that energy, I don't think we're going to be talking much about rotating storms with this set that's moving on through. Let's go back over to our radar reflectivity. There is some development south of this too, some showers and storms near Union, and those are going to keep moving toward Camden, Rockland, and coastal US 1, tracking pretty much right down Maine 17 as they do so. Heavy rain associated with these too. And I know a lot of people, it's Friday, it's the first summery day that we've had in quite some time. A lot of people out in the boats. If you know people in the Penobscot Bay, tell them to get to Safe Harbor now. Tell them to go to Stonington, Deer Isle. Tell them to head east. That's the best way to do it. And even some of these inlets near MDI, same idea. Tell them to head east toward Trenton, toward Southwest Harbor, and make their way into Safe Harbor as these storms pass, because I do think they're going to be pretty gusty as they roll through and bring some rain, some heavy rain with them, and maybe some hail. Basically, we've been watching the progression of this cold front, and if I zoom out here, a little interesting feature, you can actually visualize where the cold front is based off of the shift in wind direction. So the radar itself is actually picking up on this. Here it is, stretching from roughly Rockland almost to Freiburg area. So that right there is the cold front itself, which is pretty cool. It's not often that we end up with such a defined boundary on the radar like we have here. But this is what is firing those storms, and that's why we're starting to see some back building on the southern end of these, closer to parts of Knox County. And that's what you've got right here, moving again toward Camden and Rockland, and those will move off the coast toward Vinyl Haven and North Haven. Overall, these storms will probably be enough to take down a couple of tree limbs here or there, but I don't expect widespread issues, which is good news. Maybe some isolated high water issues, especially in areas that received a lot of rain over the last couple of events we've had, and parts of the mid-coast Penobscot Bay certainly saw quite a bit of rain, with rain totals approaching 3, 4, even 5 inches in some cases. So I would not be shocked to hear of some isolated reports of high water mixed in here. This is about it that I can see for severe weather today, though. Once these storms wrap up, I really don't anticipate much more of an issue when it comes to severe. Things will be much calmer for the evening. In fact, I think that this could be a pretty solid evening to spend some time outdoors, especially given the weather that we've seen over the last few days. We have not exactly had the nicest weather to be outside, but things have improved for today. I'm interested in this cell right here that's near Penobscot and approaching Blue Hill in Surrey. Some pretty high radar reflectivities in there. That's what we see in this area highlighted in pink. Ooh, lightning strike too, just outside Penobscot. And the reason that I bring this up is because I would not be surprised if there was some hail falling in this part of the storm, and you'll notice that the hail tracks themselves move essentially right where we were just looking. I've got my phone up in my other hand looking at some other radar data too, trying to get into the nitty-gritty of it, figure out the details, but I don't see anything right now that says significant hail, just some small hail falling underneath those storms, again about approaching quarter size roughly, give or take. Okay, NWS Caribou just re-upped this warning. And again, this is mostly for coastal Hancock County. Ellsworth to Goldsboro will be up next. MDI also likely going to see some activity from this storm. A lot of lightning with it too. All of these lightning bolts that you see are not just lightning in the clouds, those are actual lightning strikes. And notice this one just on the coastline of Northport. That's an issue for beachgoers, that's an issue for people in boats. And this is why I said if you know anybody who's on a boat in that area or is trying to soak up some sunshine because it's been fleeting this month, make sure that they're safe and have a place to go. while these warnings are in effect. Let's see here. We switch over to the visible satellite briefly. You can actually pick out where these storms are. There's a fine line of them right here. There's your thunderstorms. If I could draw a straighter line, that would help. Let me try that again. There you go. That's where the thunderstorms themselves are, and they're all moving to the east, so they're moving parallel to the coastline. And that's why I'm a little more intrigued by these, because usually as they move off the coast and over the cold ocean water, they kind of fall apart. Even this time of year, the ocean water down east still is not warm. I don't expect these storms to really produce anything too crazy, but the storm motion is why they're a bit more interesting, because they'll maintain their strength a little bit longer since they're moving parallel to the coast and not moving off the coast. Although some of these storms that you see that are moving over the Penobscot Bay now, these will likely make their way to Sedgwick and end up over Stonington, Swans Island, and Frenchboro, and that's where I do expect them to fall apart pretty quickly. This other line of storms that we were tracking earlier in the day, there's a lot of lightning and heavy downpours from Princeton down to Alexander and soon Medibemps too. Dennisville, Pembroke, that's where there could be a little bit more rain that moves through, but there's a big break in where the strongest storms themselves are. Calais will likely get a pretty impressive downpour out of this, maybe a little bit of a wind gust on the leading edge of this, gust to about 40 miles an hour or so, but I don't anticipate damage out of these. The bigger story is certainly what's going on with these storms. NWS Gray has allowed the warning to expire for that storm moving off the coast of Lincolnville now into the Penobscot Bay, which again is not much of a surprise. I don't anticipate it to get warned because it's simply moving into an environment where it can't strengthen much. This storm is still warned, though, from NWS Caribou, and it looks like wind gusts on the leading edge of that will probably be a little bit stronger than what we've seen so far today. This is a tough area to pinpoint, just due to the fact that it's so far from both the radar in Hodgson and the radar in Gray. Let me see if I can pull up the velocity here. So this is pretty far from the radar in Hodgson again, but it shows how this storm is a little bit more mature. So the radar beam is set out at a slight angle. The further you get from where the radar beam originates, the higher that angle will be over time. So we're sampling the storm pretty high up here, and there is some broad rotation. You've got these cells that are moving away from the radar, and you've got these green cells that show motion toward the radar. This is pretty broad rotation and fairly weak. This tells me two things. One, I'm not going to be talking about anything spinning, but number two is that there is some organization to this storm. So this will support things like hail and strong wind gusts making it to the ground, as well as the heavy rain that we are going to see out of this. And again, since this area did get quite a bit of rain from our last storm, I would not be surprised at all if there were some localized high water issues, especially areas of poor drainage. This is about to be right on top of Blue Hill, and that's moving next to Trenton and eventually over the bridge to MDI. So MDI is in the bullseye for this. Bar Harbor is in the bullseye for this. If you know anybody who's boating off the coast of Bar Harbor, tell them to head east, get to Winter Harbor, and safe harbor for the time being, because this storm again is likely going to pack a punch. To update you on these storms, Hope, Camden, Lincolnville, as you remember, we had some pretty strong storms here about a month ago. These do not compete with those at all, but this cell that's about to approach Camden, that's currently located over the Appleton and Hope areas, will probably be pretty loud as it rolls through and could be a bit gusty on the leading edge of it. I am starting to see more lightning, and that's one of the things that we look for in these setups. As storms strengthen a bit, we end up with more lightning strikes, and ultimately that tells us from afar, of course, that these storms have strengthened a bit. But again, this is about to move over the Penobscot Bay and eventually North Haven, and this is just not the environment that these storms need to be able to survive. Just so everybody is aware of what's going on elsewhere, we've got a couple of downpours. We had a shower near Paris in Norway that's heading toward Turner. There was a shower near Livermore and Jay. Not really a huge issue though. And then we've got a bit of a heavier shower here moving closer to Whitefield, and that's going to pass again, most likely in a similar path to this thunderstorm that we see near Union and Camden, and make its way over the Penobscot Bay. As a reminder, whenever we go like this and end up sampling the storm a bit higher up from the radar in Hodgdon, we are sampling wherever, you know, the heavy raindrops and hail could potentially be forming, and that's why you see a dramatic shift in the radar reflectivity to pinks over Blue Hill versus when we drag it back this way, we're closer to gray just a little bit. And we've actually still got some pretty impressive radar reflectivity popping up there. Yeah, the hail track certainly still picking up on that hail signal south toward Blue Hill. Let me check in with the National Weather Service and make sure that I haven't missed any updates here. All right, we're still looking pretty good. No big changes to this, and I don't really anticipate any changes to this. Just going to keep an eye on it as it moves east. I do want to quickly mention, if you have pictures of hail or anything like that and want to share them with us, great way to do that, Near Me section of our app. We had some people share pictures of the downpours and things like that earlier today, and it's just a great way to be interactive with us. Make sure you are safe or can safely send in those pictures, though. Don't put yourself in danger or anything like that to take pictures and videos. But we love to see what's going on in your backyard. It gives us another avenue to show what these storms are capable of producing, what they have produced, and also keeps us in touch with the National Weather Service so that they get an idea of what these storms are producing. It goes into decision making, like should we expand warnings, should we extend warnings, and just general things like that. Looks like this storm is still maintaining its strength as it makes its way toward MDI. It's going to track essentially right down 102 and onto MDI rather, and makes its way along Route 3 toward Bar Harbor. Big time for people to be in Maine on vacation. If you know anybody who is vacationing here, who doesn't live here, who may not be actively following our Facebook or doesn't have our app, things like that, make sure that they have a way to get these warnings, because again, I think these storms could pack a punch. And lightning is also dangerous. Lightning is something that we deal with every summer, and generally when you know it's coming, it's not a big deal. But sometimes with these storms, you can get lightning strikes that happen out ahead of them or further away from the heavy precip. Here's a great example of one just north of Ellsworth. Not much going on with the storm here, but we had that one lightning strike out ahead of it. And when you are on a place like MDI, where there are mountains and you are surrounded by ocean, that tends to put you in a not great position when it comes to lightning. So practice lightning safety with these. And again, I think the bigger concern with all of this is just going to be the heavy rain. I'm still not seeing much in the way of rotation, which is great news. Maybe some very, very broad rotation on these, but overall it doesn't show signals of trying to spin anything up. We talked yesterday about a brief risk for a spin-up tornado down east, and thankfully I don't think that's going to come to fruition today. The environment is just not exactly primed to rotate like that. The wind direction that we need to get that rotation is just not what we have here today, which is great news. Trust me, I would much rather not talk about anything like that. I'm going to zoom back out so that everybody can see what's going on here. So we have our severe warned storm. That's down east, coastal Hancock County, moving straight toward MDI, Acadia National Park. There's some thunderstorm development now south of I-95 on the New Hampshire seacoast too, and that eventually is going to affect the north shore of Massachusetts. But locally, all that we really have left, other than a couple downpours trying to move in out of the mountains, is going to be this line of storms that stretches roughly from Rockland all the way out to Calais now. And there's that heavy rain that's moving into Calais that we were talking about. And just watching these for anything that may cause damage or be an issue to people's safety. But the biggest story here is still going to be this severe thunderstorm warning in Hancock County. This is in effect until 3:30 today, so we've still got about 35 minutes left on that. And thankfully haven't really heard much in the way of damage reports coming in out of this. I'm actually on the desktop now pulling up this Facebook Live so that I can try to check in on a couple of the comments. Thanks to everybody who's been tuned in on this too, and thanks to anybody who does end up with anything to submit through Near Me. Driving from Bar Harbor to Ellsworth, loud thunder. Let's see. Somebody said they're driving to Bar Harbor at 3:30. I'd postpone that trip. I'd wait till 4. Thunder and lightning in Alexander, Calais. Raining in Bucksport. No hail, just thunder in Belfast. Okay, so it sounds like the majority of what people have seen, has been mostly just heavy rain. Thunder and sheets of rain in Blue Hill. That is certainly not unexpected with this storm. And again, as it starts to move a little bit farther south here, it's moving kind of east-southeast at this point in time. I think that it's going to eventually fall apart a little bit, moving out over the ocean. These storms are really, really torquing too. They're moving 50 miles an hour to the east-southeast. And this is probably going to cause a pretty strong set of wind gusts on the leading edge. And this is moving, again, out over the ocean, MDI area. So if you know anybody boating off the coast of Bar Harbor, Scudic Point, Stonington, those areas, certainly possible that there could be some hail, and definitely expecting some locally rougher seas, as well as strong wind gusts and heavy, heavy rain as this moves in. If we zoom back out a bit, here's that line of storms. You can actually visualize it pretty nicely from Calais all the way down to the Rockland area, and this storm is not just not letting up. Part of this has to do with the way that we actually heated up earlier today, where we kept clouds in northern Maine as the colder air started to move in. In southern Maine, saw quite a bit of sunshine, dew points in the 70s, which is extremely high for our area. And we just had plenty to let these storms feed off of, plenty of energy. So still seeing some broad rotation inside the storm itself. Again, these pixels here, toward and away from the radar. This radar that's picked up is in gray. Meteorologist Jess Conley just joined me. Tracking a couple of stronger thunderstorms down east right now. But good news is no rotation with these, so very good news. All right, this has almost reached Ellsworth at this point in time. It's going to go down 108 there and make its way over MDI in Acadia National Park, Bar Harbor, and eventually make its way to Winter Harbor. If you know anybody boating off the coast of Bar Harbor, safe harbor now, tell them to head east toward Winter Harbor. And the good news is I do expect this storm to kind of weaken a bit as it ends up over the land. It's actually showing signs now that it's not quite as organized as it once was, which is a good change of pace. But this is slowly shifting to be an issue for people who are in Acadia on land to people who may be boating, kayaking, etc. off the coast of MDI here. I just want to get a few more radar scans in here before we end this Facebook Live, just to make sure that we're getting the message out as best we can. One more time while we wait for the radar to update. Near me, best way to send us in pictures and videos. Make sure you can safely do so, but we always love to see what these storms actually produced. It gives us a good idea of what to look for in the future, and lets us know what is happening in some of your communities. These are some of these storms, when they come through, even if they don't look as bad on radar, they can actually be pretty damaging to some communities, drop a lot of trees, things like that. So feel free to send things in the Near Me section of our app, and I will be on at 4 o'clock. Jess will be on at 5, 5:30, and 6, and maybe we'll share some of those pictures too, since I think by that point in time the severe weather threat will pretty much have wrapped up entirely. This was an earlier threat for the most part today, and I don't anticipate anything to change now that the front itself has moved through. Take a look at western Maine, really just clearing out quite nicely. Couple of showers trying to make their way along interior sections of the mid-coast, but I'm really just not that impressed by those, and I am not really concerned about them either. Notice that these showers and storms are moving east, and this severe warned one is just torquing, moving east right now at about 50 miles an hour east-southeast. Still just watching for strong wind gusts to about 60 miles an hour, and maybe the threat for some hail. Throw the hail tracks back up. Yeah, you'll notice that the hail tracker is not showing quite as much as the storm makes its way toward Trenton, which I think is another signal that it may be slowly weakening. And this environment that you see down east is just not conducive to storms like this. Let me actually bring up, let's overlay the temperatures on here. So Bar Harbor, temp is 75, 76 in Bangor, Calais 85, so a much different environment than what we see over MDI. 87 in Portland, 88 Sanford, 82 Lewiston. That's the type of thing that we look for these storms to really have a lot of energy to tap into. And I think that with temperatures a little bit cooler, down east especially, we should rather see these storms kind of weaken a bit as they keep moving to the east, southeast, and eventually move over those areas where things are just a bit cooler, but it's certainly still humid down east. I was actually watching some fog on the visible satellite earlier, but I don't think there's much of that now, which is good news. Yeah, all this that you see, Jonesport to Cutler to Lubec, all of this is fog. So there's certainly still some fog lingering, and that is a chilly and cool environment, not really the environment that you look for thunderstorms. We can see the other storms off to the north, though, across interior sections of Washington County. And then here's our thunderstorms moving right along the edge of that front into coastal sections of Hancock County. Latest update from National Weather Service is calling for wind gusts approaching 70 miles an hour, and this is now moving into an area that's a little more populated, especially with tourists. So just something to keep in mind there for anybody who may be out on a boat. Hail is still mostly quarter size with this. And given the overall structure of it and the fact that it's pretty loosely structured, it's not very organized, I don't really anticipate seeing an uptick in the hail size. So this warning was continued by the National Weather Service in Caribou until 3:30. Again, wind of about 70 miles an hour possible on the leading edge of this storm. So this is about to go right down 102 and make its way out Route 3. I think I called that 108 before, and I apologize for that. This is 102 onto MDI. Again, maybe some very, very broad rotation with this storm, but certainly not the type of signature that says to me that we have to worry about anything else. Just some straight line wind gusts, which certainly could be damaging. As well as the potential for very heavy rain and some hail. And again, this warning is in effect until 3:30. I'm going to just stick with this a little while longer. A couple more scans of the radar, and then we'll start to wrap things up here. Just want to make sure we get the messaging out to anybody who is out down east. I'm also interested in this storm here that's over by Calais, just because this environment is much more conducive for severe weather. It's about to be over the border. It's actually mostly over the border now. Heavy rain through Medibemps and eventually Robbinston. But this storm is a little more interesting in that it is moving into an environment still that is conducive for keeping the storm's strength. I just am not sure how long we'll be able to keep the strength on this storm here as it moves along the coastline down east. Let me hop back over, double check some of the comments. Thundering and raining in Ellsworth, a lot of lightning and thunder in Calais. Went through Palermo. Yeah, starting to hear reports of thunder and lightning in Ellsworth. Ellsworth, I would like to add to, is on the northern edge of this. I saw reservations for 4:30. You should be okay by 4:30. I mean, this storm is really, really moving quickly. In fact, I expect it to clear MDI and Winter Harbor within the next 20 minutes or so. It's moving east-southeast at 50 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. Cover a lot of ground in not a lot of time when you're moving in a straight line at 50 miles an hour. Just want a couple more scans to come in. I've also got some radar products on my phone that I've been referencing, and sometimes I can get a bit of a better idea of what's going on in storms when I cross-reference products. Okay, so that storm is moving through Trenton right now. Some lightning strikes on the leading edge of it, tracking down coastal US 1 toward Goldsboro. Wind gusts possible to 70 miles an hour with this storm, as well as hail up to about quarter size. Still just going to keep an eye on this. Just for a couple more radar scans, just because I want to make sure that anybody who's in Bar Harbor has a way to get a real-time notification of what's going on, because this is a pretty nasty storm. Ryan and I were actually texting about this. Storms usually fizzle out when they end up down east. It's not often that we can see them not only maintain their strength, but strengthen as they keep going down east.
Do you want to together or something?
That'd be great, because I did not do that. I just want to keep an eye on this as it moves parallel to the coastal front.
Yeah, you do you.
Just in case, you know. Check the Storm Prediction Center when you get a second, and you'll see why I'm going to keep an eye on this for a second. Thankfully, again, it doesn't look all that organized here. One of the things we look for in organization is rotation in the wind field, and there's a little bit. It's pretty broad and it's not that strong, but the radar data being so far away is not quite as good as what you get close up, and this is pretty far from both the radar in Gray and the radar in Hodgdon. Oops. Okay, it looks to me like this is starting to weaken a little bit. All right, I think we're gonna let this expire. This is what I've been waiting for, though. Is see this bolt, this lightning bolt that just struck in Acadia? Look at how far away from the storm it actually is, and this is why I think it's important to remember what's going on. This is not underneath the storm itself, but people may be out and about on MDI and in Acadia and things like that. And when you are on an elevated surface like that and just surrounded by water, it is not a great place to be, especially since, you know, there's not much tree cover on top of some of the mountains in Acadia. So make sure anybody that's out there, or if you know anybody that's out there, they have somewhere to go to be safe. And again, I think some of the wind gusts with this could approach 60 or even 70 miles an hour as it keeps trekking off to the southeast. I'm going to give one more quick update on where this is tracking before we wrap this up. It's moving east-southeast at about 50 miles an hour, which puts it in Bar Harbor at about 320, Goldsboro at 325, Winter Harbor around 330, and then it will keep moving along the coastline and eventually over the ocean where it falls apart around 340 or 345. And by 4 o'clock, when we are on New Center, Maine and on air, you can catch us on air then, we will hopefully be done talking about these for the day and be enjoying the nicest evening that we've seen in quite some time. For any other weather updates, you can always follow us on social media. You can check up with our app. It actually gives you location alerts based off of your location, weather alerts based off of your location. And if you have any pictures from this, you can send those in through the Near Me section of our app. Make sure you're safe when you do so, but we like to show these on air, on social media, and it also gives us an idea of what's going on in your backyard. So thanks for sticking with me, everybody. I'm meteorologist Mike Slifer. I will be on New Center, Maine on air in about 45 minutes. Hopefully this is the last time I see you for severe weather, and we can just talk about the nice evening after this.